I feel like not all artist jobs, but some of our jobs as artists are to be journalists of the times. And if you feel the unction to do that, then you should do that.
There was a lot of music that was created in response to the racial justice movement in the summer of 2020. But there is one song that I feel really captured not only the energy of those protests, but the feel of that summer. And that song is Black Bodies by Gtar Phil. In April of 2021, this artist, producer, and musician released this powerful song and protest anthem that rails against police violence and systemic racism. And in this interview, he talks about how he created this song and how society and the times we're living in can impact the creative process and lead to great music and great art. All right, so I just want to jump right in. So, talking about Black Bodies, your single.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how you just got to writing that. Was that something that was planned, or did it just happen?
Well, it was a confluence of two things. George Floyd happened like a week ago, and I was just devastated to see just all the death porn of everybody just wanting, watch it again and again, and the whole 846. I get it, but as a black person in America, I can't watch that stuff. And I watched it one time, and I was like, I'll never watch that again. And us being bombarded with it on screen again and again and again, and of course it couldn't leave my mind. So subconsciously, the tape was constantly running. I'm producing an artist named Latasha Brown. She's the co-founder of Black Voters Matter. She's also a singer, an artist, and we were working on a song. We're working on music for her new album, and I think Damian Marley wanted to do something with her. So there was this song that I was writing called If I Riot. And I was like, yo, I think that could be cool for, y'all to work on together. And we were going to the studio with my engineer, Andy Freeman, who also happens to be my producer. When I'm producing, he's my engineer, but when I'm an artist, he's my producer. So I was on my way to the studio with him, and I was walking out the house and came back in the house to pick up my daughters, left something there, and all of a sudden I heard these lyrics. I don't want nobody that's killing black bodies, telling everybody that's how we gonna party. Like, straight up just like that. I heard it and I started saying it. And by the time I got to the kitchen, I was saying it out loud. And my daughter Gracie, she's 8, she was 7 at the time. She was like, Daddy, what's that? Did you get that off of TikTok? I was like, nah, I just wrote that. She was like, Daddy, that's your next hit. You need to go record that in the studio. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to the studio to record it right now. So when I got to Andy's, I was like, yo, change of plans. Got something else. I got this idea. I said, let me just kind of, let's go track this little idea out to chant. I don't know what else it is, but it's a chant. And we started constructing it right there. And I realized it wasn't going to be anybody else's song but mine. And so I was like, well, I had to put the other stuff to the side. And we came up with the riff, dun-dun. So we were in the studio, and I was with Chad, Chad Crawford. He was in the studio, and Andy, and we just kind of came up with that riff. And then it was like, okay, some couple little cool guitar parts, and all I had was that riff, and then I had that. So it's kind of, kind of Neil Young, rock and roll, kind of, iconoclastic 60s thing happening at the end. These two parts, and I don't know how we're going to put it together. And next thing you know, we got, I don't want nobody that's killing black bodies, telling everybody that's how we going to party. And we started putting all the pieces together, and I needed verses. So I think I went to Andy's on a Tuesday night, went to the studio, and I said, dude, I just need you to just play it on loop. Give me about an hour. And I just let it ride on loop, the verse, just the music. And I wrote the verses right there in the studio. Like, that was it. And it all came together. Policeman on my neck, trying to take my dying breath. Justice system extra fine, especially when y'all can't see mine. All that matters, so you say, but you kill me anyway. I heard Jim Crow's dead and gone, but what do I see on my phone? And it just, all the pieces literally just came together. That was it. And verse 2 happened. That was the song. And I knew I didn't want it to be really long because I already felt it was a little, I won't say preachy, but it definitely a message song. And I was like, I don't need too much else, but it's got to be rock and roll. Because I wanted to juxtapose the 60s with now. So not just civil rights, but the 60s in terms of 68, 69, Summer of Love, Rock Revolution, Hendrix, Monterey Pop Festival, Woodstock, all those things happening, psychedelia, all those things crashing into our culture, the clash of counterculture and baby boomers and the great generation and making this music that we can't forget now that's changed the world forever. I felt like I was standing in the middle of all of that because that stuff was made under circumstances similar to what we were living and what we've been living in. And I always felt like we have a chance to make great music in this generation because we're living in such jacked up times. That's what creates great music. If you have great times, it's hard to write songs that are going to grab you by the throat because you're not living where you're getting grabbed by the throat. So you got to work harder to pull it up. But, the fact that I did not get to choose to write about beauty, but I had to write about brutality and how it's got to end was fine with me because I felt like that story needed to be told and it needed to happen through my music.
When, as an artist, do you feel like when you put a song out like this that you purposely want people to walk away feeling this or thinking this?
Yeah, definitely. It's intentional. It's intentional because um, I feel like not all artist jobs, but some of our jobs as artists are to be journalists of the times. And if you feel the unction to do that, then you should do that. You should write that song. You should tell that story, whether it's about crack cocaine in the 80s, you know, gang life in the 90s, or whatever we're dealing with today. Those are the stories that we need to tell as artists. If you are feeling the prodding to write that song, you should write it. I've spent the last 4 years of my career working with a lot of activists, Reverend Sekou, and Latasha Brown, and other people of that ilk. And I've been producing with them. I've been writing songs with them. I've been on the road with them, spending lots of time with them. And I've always had a bend towards justice in who I am as a person. But to be able to bring that to my music it just felt natural. It was like, that's my message. My message isn't to sing gospel in the church up and, hallelujah all day long. I don't know. We got hell on earth. I'm not going to talk about that. We got enough people to talk about either the by and by in heaven or bringing heaven. We ain't got heaven on right now. So let's talk about how we get it here. Let's talk about the hell that we're living in right now and you living in heaven and how that's unequal. And if you really are a believer, you should be concerned about me living in hell right now. So is that uh, um and and just being honest about the moment artistically, just being honest about what are we going through, what's happening. So
Is this a protest song?
absolutely, 100%. When Tasha heard it, she was like, "Oh my God, that is a street protest right there." And I didn't really know how to write a protest song until I started playing them with those people and with Tasha and with Reverend Sekou, and they showed me the elements of a protest song. It's an earworm. It's something that people can get in the streets. And what they explained was that, listen, a protest song, it's not gonna be super complicated because the person in the front may be bulling up the song. It's almost like a testimony service song in church. It's got to be simple enough for somebody without a microphone or only a bullhorn to say it and repeat it, and then a mass of people have to pick it up. So you have to have diction and you have to have phraseology that works to be reverberated off of human bodies in a mass. So I don't want nobody that's killing black bodies, telling everybody that's how we going to party. That works. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's a protest song. And it gets stuck in your head. And it makes sense. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I do feel like that. Absolutely. And it's something that gives you energy, makes you mad, and makes you like, yo, that's gotta end. So let's talk about the black bodies. The very first time I ever heard about Emmett Till, I was 8 years old. Why do I have to be that young to find out about a black kid getting tortured to death in 1955 for supposedly wolf whistling at a white lady? That junk like gave me nightmares. And I went home and asked my parents about it. And it was crazy, like to see the videos and to watch Eyes on the Prize and all that kind of stuff. Be like, yo, that little boy is older than me and he's dead. He never got to live out a life. And it started with him, and you think about all the black people who've been murdered and lynched and killed, and it's like, this isn't new. This didn't just start with Michael Brown. This has been happening a long time, so we need to talk about it. We need to get it in the street. We need to make sure that people understand that this is real. And music can bring people together in ways to have the conversation where getting on the soapbox may not. So, yeah, it's a protest song.
I think you have answered every other extra question that I had here. Is there anything else that you want people to know about this song, or even just like I call this creatives about the movement, because people were saying this isn't a movement, this is a movement, and I was like, I feel that, and I think that I believe that songs like this and art like this, it adds to the conversation and to the movement in a way that people can often kind of forget about a protest.
Mm-hmm.
It just, like you said, it just sticks, it reverberates. It's just something that you just can't. Because as soon as I hear those lines, policeman, policeman on my neck, trying to take my dying breath, I can't help but think about.
Yeah, because that's what it was about. Yeah, and it's funny, just as much as that, that solo was 51 takes. Okay? Now, the solo you hear is not 51 takes. It's the 51st take. But that solo was 51 takes to get to that solo. We cut it over like 2 or 3 days. I tried. It was like, in there. I think I tried again. Finally got it to where it was feeling right. And I had to grab a couple of different pedals that I wasn't using, and we turned an amp all the way up, had it on a 412 stack that we were playing through, and it was like blazing loud. It was like shaking the windows loud. And when I finally got it on the 51st take, I told Andy, I said, turn down the lights. And I just went somewhere and I didn't tell him. And when I was done with it, like the guitar, you hear it heaving. And I was like, when I finally was done, I just stood there and he was like, come out. He was like, we're done. In that take, there's no overdub, there's no It's none of it stitched together. It's all one pure take. And he said, what was going on when you did that? And I said, I depicted 846 in the solo. From the beginning of the confrontation to his dying breath. And that's what that is. And there's this, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a commentary on how we make art out of lynching porn for black people, but it's our story. And it's not for you to gawk at, but to get involved so that we don't have to tell that story anymore. And that's the part, it's complicated, but when you have racism in America the way you do, everything's complicated because we have this declaration of freedom that doesn't apply to us. But we're the greatest contributors of culture to this nation. The number one export of this nation is our work everywhere. And we're not allowed to reap the benefits of it as a people because of senseless acts of violence like this. Because it's their way of keeping us in check. No one's ever going to say it. No one's ever going to admit it, but that's what it is. So let's just take the conversation right where it needs to be. And I think having this guitar, it's armed me to have the conversation with people who would never have that conversation, who would never admit to those words, who would never admit to, who wouldn't even say all lives matter, but they hear that guitar and that connects with them in an emotional space of, oh my God, that's moving me. I want to talk about it. So I feel like if this is the pipeline to have the conversation, that's what I'm here for. And I feel like that's the other half of the song. Half of it is protesting, yo, you ain't killing us no more. The other half is, you notice that y'all still killing us? So it brings everybody to the table, and I'm not bragging when I say that. I don't feel like I gave myself this. I just feel like this is the gift of whatever the music it is. That there's a universality to it that allows people to come to the conversation who would not listen to, a hip hop tune, or would not listen to a preacher, or would not, watch MSNBC because they want to own the libtards, but they'll have the conversation around rock and roll guitar. So if that's what brings the conversation, because at the end of the day, we're still all people. We still need to have the conversation because we're going to all hang together or we will surely hang separately. Ben Franklin said that, I believe. So, or Thomas Jefferson.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Listen to the episode on the podcast, Trish Pluggedn, wherever you get your podcasts.